Hello there, it's another time for a basic science lesson. Now today we'll be looking at the kinetic theory of matter. Now the objectives of this lesson is to help learners define matter and give the states of matter. Learners should be able to state the kinetic theory of matter. Use the kinetic theory of matter to explain the states of matter. Describe the structure of solids, liquids and gases using kinetic theory of matter. Now first and foremost, we need to determine what matter is, because we are talking about the kinetic theory of matter. So we need to answer the question, what is matter? Matter is anything that has mass and take up space. So matter is made up of small particles known as atoms. So matter can be presented in different states. Each of them has specific characteristics, and these are the three states of matter. We have the solid, liquid and gaseous states of matter. Now you can see the arrangement of the particles that make up the three states of matter. Now this is representative. This is the solid state. You can see that all the particles are arranged in a regular pattern, while liquid, they are not arranged in a regular manner because there are spaces between the particles, while the particles in gases are widely apart, as you can see in the picture here. Now moving along, what is the kinetic theory of matter? Now the kinetic theory of matter postulates that all matter are made up of tiny particles, that is atoms and molecules, and these particles of matter are always in constant random motion. Yes, that is what kinetic theory of matter states. You see. And the kinetic theory of matter can be used to explain the states of matter, change of state of matter, and also diffusion. Now as you can see here, the solid state has the molecules or atoms in it in a regular manner. The liquid is not really is not forming a regular pattern, as you can see here, and the molecules of gases are wide apart. Now moving on, let's look at the kinetic theory of matter and states of matter. We're going to be looking at solid states. We're going to be looking at the kinetic theory of matter and the solid states. Now in solids, the particles are closely packed together and arranged regularly in a three-dimensional pattern. As you can see here, you can see that all the particles are arranged together regularly. As you can see, they are tightly packed together. The particles of solids vibrate and rotate about fixed position. Now, as you can see that because there is no space in between the particles per se, though the particles are moving, they can't move from one place to another. They can only vibrate at their fixed point. They can only vibrate at their fixed point. Now they have very strong forces of attraction between one another. Now between this particle and the other, there's a strong attractive force that holds them together, and that is why the particles of solids cannot move about freely. Now as you can see here in this picture right here, you can see that the particles are arranged in a regular way. You can see that they are regularly arranged. The particles are packed together closely, as you can see right here, and there are strong forces holding them together. Now moving ahead, we'll be looking at kinetic theory of matter and the liquid state. Now in liquids, unlike in a solid, the particles in a liquid are not held in fixed positions. Though the attractive forces between the particles of a liquid are strong, the particles have more energy and can partially overcome the forces of attraction. This means that the particles can move about freely by sliding over one another. Now this particular picture here encapsulates all that I've just said right here. Now as you can see that the particles are not as tightly packed together as that of solids. They have more kinetic energy than the molecules in solids, and they have like some room for them to move around. Actually they slide over one another, as you can see here. So here in summary, in a liquid the particles are not arranged in a regular way. The particles can slide past each other. The forces holding the particles together are weaker than the one in solids. Now moving along, we'll be looking at the kinetic theory of matter and the gaseous state. The particles of a gas are far apart from one another. the particles of a gas move at high speeds and have very weak forces of attraction between them. As a result, the distance between gas particles can be changed. They move rapidly in any direction. As you can see that the particles here, they have more space to move around than you have in the liquid state. So in summary, you can see that in a gas, the particles are much farther apart than in a liquid or a solid. There is only weak forces between the particles. In other words, the particles, the forces holding them together are not strong enough, you see. And the particles move quickly into all the space available independently. Now moving along, you can see that because of kinetic theory of matter and the states, it confers, because of the nature of the structure of solid, liquid and gases, it confers on them certain characteristics which we'll be looking at right now. Now if you look at the solid state, you can see that the solid objects are very rigid. They are rigid because the particles are tightly packed together and there are no spaces between them. That's why solids are rigid. They have fixed shape, fixed volume, high density. The particles are closely tight and organized, and they can hardly be compressed. Why? Because the particles are already so close together, so we can't compress them. But in liquids are not rigid. Why? Because the particles are not as tightly packed together as that of solid. So their shape, liquid is not rigid. Liquids have no fixed shape. They only take the shape of the container that they are contained in. But they do have fixed volume and they have average to high density. The particles are closely tight but not as organized as that of solids, and they can be slightly compressed. Now let's look at the gaseous state. The gas has this characteristic: it doesn't have any rigid shape, it has no fixed shape, no fixed volume, it has low density, the particles are far apart and disorganized, and they can be compressed. In other words, when gases are compressed, that means that all the particles are brought together and they change their states to liquid. So that is that about the characteristics of the states of matter. Now this brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Now let's take a quick look at the summary. Now matter is anything that has mass and volume. So matter is in three states: solid, liquid and gaseous states. Now kinetic theory postulates that all matter are made up of tiny particles, atoms and molecules, and these particles of matter are always in constant random motion. The kinetic theory of matter can be used to explain the structure and the characteristics of the various states of matter. Now before we go, I want to pause this video and attempt the questions that you have as assessments, so that you can know how much of the lesson that you have imbibed. And I will see you again in the next lesson. Bye bye.